James, for coming. Today's topic of our event is right behind us. It's everything about WebVR, and it's super unfortunate that I'm not able to withstand the whole event today because I wanted to learn more about that. But yeah, James, I think, is the man to ask things about WebVR, and he's a principal developer at Genus VR. And yeah, I think today we'll be able to learn a lot. Prepare your questions. But in meanwhile, I wanted to announce something. We've been working pretty hard to make it happen, and tomorrow we'll update our client, and the Oasis teleportation from Somnium space to Genus VR will be available from tomorrow on.
That's great.
Awesome. So
Excellent.
people will be able to go not only to high fidelity, but also to Genus right now. And hopefully, James, we can chat so that there is other linked back to Somnium as well, so that people can actually try and explore.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's the announcement. And of course, we want to build on top of that, and we want to make more VR worlds available like that, but I'm pretty excited that we put Genus in, so that the true, I would say, founding members of VRBA now are connected at least one side, but we'll... oh, here's a cheater coming. Cheater is coming. Okay, so Snake, I'm giving you microphone rights as well.
Okay, thank you.
So without further ado, guys, take it over. And I guess Sasha will be hosting it with James. And thanks a lot for coming, and I hope you'll enjoy this event.
Great. Well,
thank you, Arthur. It's fantastic to be here, and thank you, James, for making the time. This is, I think it's a very important talk to have, because I believe that ultimately these walled gardens that we're in right now, and Oculus and Viveport they're fantastic, but I think that the open web will win in the end. And and so I'd like to hear your comments on just how things are developing and what you see as that roadmap.
I think absolutely. I think anytime we have these new technologies, we do see a lot of these kind of marketplaces pop up around getting kind of native apps in, engaging developers, things like that. And I think those are necessary to kind of advance the system. But long term, I think the real kind of power is going to be integrating all these kind of amazing technologies with the web. And I think that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. A lot of people we talk to, they think, oh, well, what's the point of just bringing, a website into a VR space? It's like, okay, that's kind of cool, but why do that when I can just, use the 2D website? And I think that kind of people have different views of what the web actually is. And we see those kind of 2D websites. That's kind of the end user interface for us. But really the power of the web is the data underneath all that, and kind of tying all the data from all these different sources into an app that can be kind of pulling data from, say, your Facebook account, but then mixing up with maybe Google Maps data. That's the type of thing that the web has always done really well, that native apps have always kind of, if you're building a native app, you kind of have to do it all yourself. And I think now, native apps are building more and more on top of these web APIs. So, we're already kind of using the web under the hood. Why not also have the user interface just hosted on the web? So you just kind of click a link and you jump right into these 3D worlds and have that same level of interaction that we expect from these kind of full desktop apps.
That is a powerful use of a VR plus web. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, most of the web stuff, the WebVR stuff, is running on a Java at the back end, and it can get some insane frame rates, I'm hearing.
Well, it's JavaScript, so it actually runs, directly in your web browser, kind of interpreted on your client. And yeah, we can hit easily 90 frames per second on Oculus and Rift. Mobile devices, obviously, there's a little more kind of performance constraints, but if you've optimized your world well, you can absolutely hit those frame rates just running in any old browser.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is so powerful. And the fact that, correct me if I'm wrong, it's literally like I can send a link by Twitter and people can click that link, hit an icon, put on their Oculus Go or their Oculus Quest or whatever, or HTC or mixed reality, and be right on there.
Exactly. And even beyond just links, like Facebook has a games on Facebook platform where through Messenger you can actually embed these WebVR or WebGL WebVR experiences kind of directly in a message that you send to someone. So that's kind of the power of building this stuff on the web, is all these companies have put together these kind of platforms for, you know, curation of content, sharing of content. As a web app, you can just kind of jump right onto that and start sharing immediately. There's less kind of barrier to entry, convincing someone, okay, you need to go to the store, Steam store, the Oculus store, find our app, install it, wait for it to download, that kind of thing, you know?
Gotcha. Yeah. So sorry about my background noise. I have my family. Just a little update for everybody here. We have about 2 feet of snow outside. There's no school today. I'm not able to work. So life and virtual are intertwining today. So pardon the background noise.
I know the feeling. I just had a kid myself, so you know, every once in a while you may hear him pop up.
And you're kind of going, oh, open plan is going to be awesome until you have a bunch of kids. So anyway, I just wanted to see if you would speak on Metcalfes Law and how that is going to impact the growth of WebVR and VR as a whole.
Sure. I mean, I think, for those who aren't familiar, Metcalfes Law says that the value of a system grows, as a square of the number of users. Because, you know, if you have one phone, it's not useful by itself. If you have 2 phones, you can make one connection there. If you have 4 phones, you know, each of those can make connections. So the more people you have using your platform, your technology, the more useful it is to everyone who's on that network. And so we have all these different platforms like Somnium Space, High Fidelity, Second Life, AltSpace, Janus, obviously, you know, all these different platforms where they're kind of their own systems. You know, you connect to Hi-Fi, you're going to see other Hi-Fi users, and that's it. Same here, you know, you're all in the Somnium Space client. What we see the benefit of building for the web and kind of coming up with these standards for communication between these applications is that you're no longer, you shouldn't be restricted to having to install every one of these different clients. If we have kind of like an underlying network protocol that we can all use to kind of communicate between our systems, it kind of benefits everyone in that, you know, we could just kind of hop right over to High Fidelity if we had this kind of underlying standard that all of our clients spoke. We could just hop over without having to all install. Right now, if we tried to do that, you know, we have the Oasis, the teleporter, where we could go through that, but probably half of you don't have High Fidelity installed, so that would be kind of a, you know, a problem. We'd have to like wait for you guys to install that, things like that. Versus if we had more of these kind of underlying standards and could just jump between the systems, you know, just like we do in a web browser. When you go to a new website, you don't have to install a different client to view that. You just click the link and you go from site A to site B without having to worry about kind of what technology they're using under the hood.
That's a really powerful point. I hadn't made the connection between web browsing and metaverse surfing, shall we say. I'm curious also about assets, and how does WebVR handle assets and interoperability between different experiences with assets?
So WebVR itself doesn't really say anything about your assets or your rendering. WebVR is really just kind of the layer that lets you send your output to the headset and get the tracking information from that headset, and you know, the hands and other like tracked controllers, things like that. So each WebVR application can choose itself like which formats they want to support. So most of them that are out there, many WebVR experiences are built on top of 3JS, Janus Web included, and 3JS includes loaders for all kinds of different file formats. We've got OBJ, Collada, FBX, GLTF is the kind of forerunner for web-based stuff right now. STL, VRML, all these different formats are out there, and it's up to each client to decide, do we want to support this format? Janus Web, we make the attempt to support every format out there because we kind of see the value of building on top of the web is that you can pull in all these assets from existing websites, from existing content hosts, and just kind of mix and match them to build, you know, whatever world you're trying to build. Other systems may have kind of a smaller set, like I think Mozilla Hubs, I believe, is GLTF only. A couple other ones are like, you know, OBJ or Colada, because those are kind of the easiest to work with. They've been around forever. So again, WebVR doesn't necessarily dictate what formats you support, but it's kind of allows you to build those applications in a way that you don't have to target. You know, I don't have to write special code for Oculus Rift versus HTC Vive versus, you know, say the Oculus Go or Quest. Though we kind of, by building to this one, the WebVR spec, you can reach all of those devices just kind of out of the box.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think we're all, by the fact that we're all here, I just want to point out that we are bleeding edge people, all of us here. We are so far ahead of the curve. 95% of people have not tried VR yet, and here we are, and we've probably, some of us have been in, like myself and James have been in for years now. So just point that out. And also, I think most of us do want our assets, our, you know, our swords, our shoes, our pets, everything to come with us wherever we go.
Right.
Just as you would in the real world. I want to be able to pull out my phone in VR and actually see my phone. And so I'm just curious how that sort of movement of yeah, what I would call assets, but you probably have another word for it. But, you know, my stuff, my loot. How do I move it?
That's exactly it. Yeah, I mean, so we've been working with Somnium Space, High Fidelity, and a few other companies in the space. We founded the VRBA, Virtual Reality Blockchain Alliance. Kind of our initial thinking was about, you know, storing, if you store all of your identity and your possessions on the blockchain, you know, I know that's kind of a loaded term. People have a lot of ideas of what blockchain means. But the way we're looking at it is it's really just an open, decentralized ledger of transactions and kind of who owns what. So in that sense, storing identity and kind of record of your possessions on this system is great because it allows any application, any of our kind of virtual world platforms or just a regular website can kind of look that information up and integrate that with their system. So if we all kind of were using the same blockchain to store our identities, I could use that same identity, you know, maybe I have an avatar associated with my identity. I could jump between systems that implement this standard without having to go through kind of recreating my avatar, trying to get it as close as possible, you know, to how I normally look. You know, every time you move between these platforms, there's kind of manual work. Again, file formats, you have to kind of convert things to work in the formats that the platform uses. And we think that by kind of making a common system that we can all interact with, it just lowers that barrier to entry for the user, which benefits us all.
That's great. And the sort of the elephant in the room here is, from my perspective, is that, you know, Zuckerberg and Oculus have said we want to see 1 billion people in VR. At the same time, you have our dear friend over at Hi-Fi saying, I want 1 billion people in VR. So, and WebVR is somewhere in between all that. I'm just curious, how do you see this interoperability rolling out across different platforms, especially the walled gardens?
Well, that's always kind of a bit of contention. The walled garden plays, they exist because they make money for the companies. You know, Facebook puts, they have the Oculus Store, Oculus Home, and so it's in their interest for people to acquire their applications through the store. WebVR is kind of an end run around that, where you don't have to be a licensed developer. You don't have to go through an approval process. You can publish anything you want, whatever. There are no restrictions. No one can stop you from publishing something. You can run it on your own website, you know? So This is good for kind of freedom of expression, letting users kind of build what they want to do, especially letting kind of new developers, people who aren't necessarily professionals, they can jump in and start creating with WebVR without having to pay a fee, without having to go through all these hoops. You know, again, the closed ecosystem app stores, they exercise that level of control partly to protect users. You know, because you can make content that's kind of offensive. You can make content that makes people feel sick. And you can make content that's just not in line with the values of those companies. You know, Facebook has guidelines about what you can and can't post on Facebook, and those are going to apply just as well in the you know, VR, wherever they're taking the VR version of, you know, Facebook.com. You know, when we start to see that. So again, WebVR kind of gives you that end run around. You don't necessarily get that same kind of ensured level of quality, but I think that it's important to kind of the ecosystem as a whole to allow people to experiment, to allow people to build those things that, you know, wouldn't necessarily be approved by these closed systems, and just kind of explore the possibilities. Yeah.
I've lost my mic. Lost my mic there. Is everyone still hearing me with the echo?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, so just, you mentioned Mozilla Hubs. Just before we go, as Chris Miranda says, down the rabbit hole and into some dark corners of, because any good web application has the dark side and the light side. So I'd just like to see if you wouldn't mind touching on Mozilla Hubs quickly, because they are seeming to gain a bit of traction.
Sure. I mean, Mozilla Hubs, it's another kind of great WebVR project. You know, they're doing the same type of meeting. You know, you can have these kind of small scale meetups. You know, I think they have a good platform. You know, built on WebRTC, so it's kind of like a decentralized setup. You know, we would love to interoperate with that. You know, I think there's room in the market for all kinds of different applications to do the same type of thing, and each of us kind of focuses on, you know, some people, they do this for meetings. You know, we do our meetings in Janus VR. We kind of all, every week we jump into an empty warehouse, and we all just kind of like drag and drop images onto the walls and kind of populate, you know, okay, this is our update for the week. This is what I've been working on. This is, you know, what we're working on for the next week, kind of thing. And we can all kind of, you know, we record it, we kind of save it afterwards, so you can kind of go back and see what we discussed. And I think Mozilla Hubs is going for that same type of thing, just kind of that collaborative workspace type of environment. So again, you know, I think there's, we're seeing all kinds of different people experimenting with what you can do with this platform. And I think really Mozilla, you know, they do a great job of, like, you can drag and drop models into the world, which a lot of native applications, they're kind of a little more difficult to get content built for them. You know, you have to kind of bring it into the system kind of through an import process. You have to, maybe you build the whole thing in a 3D editor and then kind of export it. With these web-based systems, you can kind of like go to a website, like say Sketchfab has the API integration, or Google Blocks. Or you can even just, if you have a website that's just like a directory listing of a bunch of 3D objects you have, you can just drag and drop directly from those websites into the virtual world, and that's automatically kind of synced to everyone. So again, I think that's most people are building these WebVR apps. They're kind of going for these network-enabled collaborative experiences that kind of you get kind of not necessarily for free, but it's very easy to build these things using the web platform, which a lot of the native engines don't give you quite as much in that direction.
Fantastic. That gives us, at least gives me a better sense of what I was up to. Now we, as you can see, we're building out. We're just getting ready to launch. We've got land. The outlines are showing potential land size, and I've spoken directly with our founder, and he's said he's willing to support the whole range of human experience, shall we say, across spectrum. So I'd be curious to see, just if you wouldn't mind touching, as we all know that the adult industry is technology adoption, and it's no doubt impacting VR headset sales, and I think it will have an impact on Oculus Quest sales. I'd be curious to hear what's happening in that space.
No, absolutely. I think, about 2 weeks ago, Carmack tweeted, he put out a tweet saying that for them, I assume according to their usage stats, the web browser is the #1 VR app. People are spending more time in the web browser in VR than they are in any one individual app. Viewing basically either 2D or 360 or VR 180 videos. I think there was a little bit of an unspoken truth there that probably many of those people using the browser in the Oculus browser, in the Oculus Home, are using it to look at adult content, which again is not available in their store. So again, that's part of humanity, part of the human experience. The internet itself was built, by many of those people in that industry. At least it was kind of matured, let's say. So I think that I fully respect that Oculus and Vive, not Vive, what's
Windows
the name?
Vive.
Yes, the Steam store, that's right, that's the word I'm looking for. They want to keep their stores family-friendly, so to speak. But to block content, to say that you can't use our device to look at this thing, that seems a little draconian to me. So if someone wants to make that content and make it available to people, they should be allowed to do that. Within the laws of their home country. Home.
Well, I mean, I think that we're all adults here, and I think we understand that this will be part of our technology, just as it is part of humanity. So then let's just go a little darker there for a second, and we have Onion, we have Tor browsers, we have the dark web, and so I'd be curious to see, is it possible for somebody to kind of hijack your VR through WebVR? And this is speculation here, but I'm just concerned, like, this thing is rewiring my brain. Could somebody hijacking it and messing with my inputs and messing with me in a physical sense?
I mean, yes, but I think that the concerns of that kind of thing are a little bit overblown. I think that anytime we see new technology, there's never, when the technology ends up on the scene, of course there hasn't been research done into, like, when TV was new, people are going to sit in front of this screen for, hours and hours a day, and what's that going to do to their brains? What kind of effect does that have? Or physically to your eyeballs, if you're staring at this screen, your eyes are just you're going to go blind. And, time has shown that that isn't really what happens, Yes, you can spend too much time watching TV, but the TV itself, looking like the screen itself, isn't what's bad. It's what you spend the time looking at. So yeah, just like on a TV, you could go down some really deep rabbit holes, looking at TV content, looking at YouTube, conspiracy theories, whatever. I know there were some concerns when VR first came out that it's like, it's like this direct path into your brain that you can kind of, show someone some content and they'll just kind of, you'll infect their brain or something. And I think that's a common narrative in fiction, but in reality, I don't think it works that way. I think that as we learn how to use this technology, what works, what doesn't, we'll come up with guidelines about just like, these are things you should and shouldn't do. And there will be some security things, like if someone can run a script that maybe if I could inject a script into your client, that now I just show my ads in front of your face wherever you go instead of, what you're supposed to be seeing. So those are concerns that you need to account for security. If you're executing remote code, what does that remote code have access to do? So I think, again, that's one, a lot of these bigger companies with the closed systems, they're playing it safe in that regard, that, just disable all scripting, only allow a very minimal set of building of kind of actions, collaborative actions type of thing. On our side, I think we're looking more at what's possible, what can we do, and we have discovered a few places where people found like a way, oh well, I can use that to do something malicious, and we try to fix that as we find them, and kind of look at that holistically about like, okay, what type of things are dangerous to allow people to do, and what type of things are safe. So yeah, I mean, I think there's some exploration left to do there,
I would say. I mean, I think that this is a sort of, as you say, a narrative that VR is dangerous somehow, and that we're going to be all absorbed into the matrix. I would like to sort of push forward a little bit and say, like, what do you see for WebVR in, say, like 2 years? What could we expect? Could we expect this level of fidelity? Like, do we sort of get to Uncanny Valley?
No, I think absolutely. The level of graphics you can do with the web right now you could do this. This is not a problem. There are the engines available for developing on native are more advanced. Absolutely. If you look at Unity, Unreal, these are engines that have billion-dollar budgets. They've been worked on for 10, 15, 20 years. So they're ahead of the game. Absolutely. But the capabilities of WebVR are there. It's just about building the tools, the engines that can kind of expose that functionality in a way that's easy for content creators to leverage. Right now, it's like, especially when I started, it's like, oh, well, 3JS, okay, that's great. It takes care of all the rendering. But all the kind of entity logic and kind of, network synchronization and, interactivity, things like that, were things that we had to build ourselves from scratch. So, you start off in this world and you're like, I want to take an example, throw snowballs around. It's like, okay, in a mature engine, that's just a matter of, all right, you take that object, you assign a physics, component to it, you give it a mass, and, there you go, you're ready to go. You got some, like, event handlers. When we were building Janus Web, the engine that Janus Web is built on is called Elation Engine. I started that in 2011. And then kind of Janus Web, 2015, I think, was the first client. Each of those kind of interactions is something you have to build from scratch. But once you've done that work, you've laid that groundwork, it becomes much easier for other people. So again, as the engines go through these kind of development cycles, as they get better documented, as more examples show up of what's possible, I think that's the problem WebVR suffers from right now, is people have a perception that it's only for these really simple things, that it can't do more than that. And that really comes down to what people have been able to build with their own skill sets. Most WebVR developers are not professional game developers. They're people who are just enthusiasts. They're kind of hobbyists. And I think they've been able to build some amazing things, but they're still not of the same level as, people ask us frequently, when will Janus Web look like GTA 5? It's like, well, what was the budget for GTA 5? It was several $100 million, If we had that budget, we could make things look very pretty, but we don't. So, we're kind of picking our battles and kind of focusing on areas where we think it's difficult because we have to prove to people that WebVR is capable of all the things that we already know. Like, having worked on it for a while, we know what's possible. But there's a difference between a prototype and a finished product, and it takes a lot of work to get from a prototype to that finished, polished product. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, congratulations for sticking with you. I just want to touch quickly on, and maybe you could correct me, do I see Unity, Unreal, and WebVR as sort of Apple, Microsoft, and open source, or Linux? Is that kind of a fair comparison? I guess you could look at it that way. I mean, Unreal and Unity both have ways to export to the web, so it's a little bit of a weird situation. I look at the web as really just a distribution platform, and if you look at like Unreal, they have their own app store. Unity doesn't quite have an app store, but they have kind of agreements with Oculus. They have their marketplace, and so for them, that's where the money is really just kind of these marketplaces that are set up around their developer ecosystems. To me, WebVR, the web in general, is just another platform for delivering this content. So it's hard to really say where it fits on like a spectrum like you spelled out. Yeah.
All right, and I lost my mic again. Can we touch on A-Frame just a second, and also, did I hear you say that you've been working on a 3JS graphics engine for 3D web since 2011?
That's right. Yeah. So I found out about the 3JS when it was kind of pretty new, basically still Mr. Doob's little side project, and kind of started kind of playing around with it, and it's an amazing engine, but it really is just like a rendering library. It doesn't have all the kind of logic for entities and how to add logic, how to kind of structure your app. So again, I started working on that engine back in 2011. A-Frame is a very similar architecture. They came along a little bit later. They had kind of the backing of Mozilla and a great team kind of working on that. So they've built a great platform. I would say it's pretty comparable in feature set to what Genus Web has. But yeah, so I know there were two parts to that question.
Oh, just I was curious about how did A-Frame tie into WebVR, and also did you? I mean, I should know my history here, but how close were you to the DK1 and the prototype for Oculus?
Okay, so well, I'll go back to, I can easily answer that last question. So I started with the engine before what the modern wave of VR kind of got started, Yeah. So I was mainly focusing WebGL, just kind of like the 2D client type of thing. I felt and still feel that the web as a platform for distributing games is severely undervalued. People are not taking it seriously. And because they're not taking it seriously, no one's building content for it. So you don't have those examples to look at of like, this is what's possible if you put that kind of time and money into it. No one's really bit the bullet on that. We've seen a lot of demos, some really amazing demos, but very few kind of finished products. And again, I think that comes down to the app stores. You put something in the app store, and it kind of comes with that built-in advertising, built-in promotional systems. With the web, you're kind of on your own. Are you a big fish in a small pond, or are you a small fish in a big pond? The web, you're a tiny little minnow in a massive ocean. So it's very difficult to build drive traffic to your website. Get people to actually come there so that they can experience your game. Versus you publish something on the app stores, and on the first week maybe you'll be featured, and that kind of leads to like a snowball effect. So again, it's difficult getting people to actually come to your WebGL, WebVR app, but it kind of benefits from those type of, to use a term that I hate, the viral marketing type aspects, where someone shares something on Twitter, their friends share it, and, if it's really popular, it'll blow up. We've had worlds where, one of our most popular worlds was, I've done a lot of work with Internet Archive on their in-browser software emulation, and one of our kind of big triumphs was we got Windows 3.1 emulated running in a browser. And then I took that emulated Windows 3.1 and put it into a WebVR world. So you kind of load up into this kind of 80s style, office, and it's kind of booting up Windows 3.1. It plays a little ta-da, startup sound, dials up to a virtual ISP that I'm running in Amazon Web Services, and kind of you have a real working version of Windows 3.1 running in your browser in VR. And so we kind of, we put that out there for the 20th anniversary of Windows 3.1 was a year and a half or 2 years ago. So we put that out there, and like within a few days, we had something like 9,000 different users loading up that space. And kind of, you know, getting 9,000 people to install your app is difficult if you're a small kind of company. With just kind of the kind of ease of sharing of the web, we were able to do that, you know, with no effort kind of thing. Yeah?
Fantastic.
And then as far as, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, just saying that that's fantastic. I hope that you'll join in our Discord at the end and post some links to what you consider as really great uses of WebVR, because I have a couple of apps. I can't remember it's kind of skipping my brain right now, but you know, it's an app inside Steam that allows me to look at various web things. But you know, and I've been to Janus a number of times, but again, it's the classic, you know, empty world syndrome. Unless I bring a bunch of friends with me, I'm kind of just banging around by myself, and then, you know, I go out to do something where I have people to interact with.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a problem that a lot of us have struggled with these virtual worlds, is the number of worlds very quickly outstrip the number of users that you have. You know, a lot of early adopters are creators. They join these platforms because they want to explore what's possible to create using these new systems. And so often they end up kind of getting frustrated. You know, they'll try out a bunch of different systems, and you know, hopefully they'll build something amazing and huge and, you know, epic. The hope is that they'll be able to bring users in, but you know, that's proven to be very difficult for everyone in this space. You know, I think VRChat has done the best of all of the kind of social VR worlds as far as kind of getting that mass audience. But even there, you run around in a lot of, like, in the core areas in VRChat, there's people running around. But if you just kind of pick some random worlds off the list, many of them are empty. And again, I think that comes down to the size of the VR market right now. It's just kind of, it's still growing, you know?
Yeah, I believe that, I mean, and I've seen this in lots of public, you know, articles, et cetera, that we are still super early in the adoption curve, and that when the so-called killer app shows up, along with the right piece of hardware, I think that we will see a huge spike in that adoption. The one question that now be move on, and this might be my. Hopefully somebody in my office will grab that, but is being able to yourself across VR worlds without, how does that work?
Sorry, I think you broke up a little bit, but it sounds like you're talking about linking between WebVR worlds?
Just the ability to transfer seamlessly between VR experiences in WebVR without leaving VR. Like, how does that,
okay.
I know how it works in Janus, but is there a way of doing that just sort of out in the Wild West WebVR?
There is, yeah. So with the WebVR standard, there was a certain event that gets fired. Like, if you have a headset on, you're in a WebVR experience, and you click a link. So within Janus Web, we have the ability to, you know, the Janus client has our seamless portals where you can actually open up the portal to this other world. It might be hosted on a different server, but you can see through it. You can see if there's anyone on the other side of that portal moving around, you can see them. You can kind of peer through it before you walk in. So within the Janus ecosystem, we can do that, where we can kind of actually render both worlds at the same time. When you're talking about jumping to something like A-Frame or Sumerian or you know, any of the other kind of web-based platforms that are out there, we can't necessarily do that kind of rendering both worlds, but we can basically you click the link, and as long as the other side has implemented this this event, this on VR display present. I forget the name of the event, but basically, if you handle that event, when your page loads and the user is in VR, we automatically kick you back into VR. So you get maybe like a black screen for a little bit, or I think they try to maintain kind of the previous view until the new one has finished loading. But yeah, it's up to the site you're linking to has to implement it, but it's definitely possible to do that. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, and we're getting towards the end of our time, and I want to open it up to questions. I just wanted to say, did you want to talk specifically about like the next year for Janus? And we're super excited to get Oasis working back and forth. For any of you who don't know, that's a transporter that allows you to basically go directly from Somnium to other social VR worlds without going back through the Steam store or the Oculus store. And I'd be curious to just sort of what's on the roadmap for Janus itself for the next year. And then I'd like to open it up. I'll turn it over to Snake if he's still here, and get some questions happening, because I do have another thing to go to.
Sure. Yeah, so for the next year, I mean, for WebVR in general right now, it's kind of a transitionary period where the WebVR spec is a few years old now. I think the first version was in 2014. The kind of 2.0 of that, they're calling the WebXR spec, and that kind of allows you to target VR and AR using the same library. So that's kind of, they just published the kind of first draft officially last month. So we're going to be kind of upgrading our systems to use that, kind of take advantage of some of the new functionality that's available there. So that's on my plate for Janus Web. For Janus as a company, we're continuing to look at ways that we can work with other companies in this space. So ways that we can enable people not necessarily to port your entire system to the web, because that is a large undertaking, but looking at ways that integrating with the web can benefit people's platforms. Like we did a project with High Fidelity recently, where we implemented their whole networking stack in the web browser in JavaScript. So what that allows is now you can build a website, whether it's a full 3D kind of immersive VR experience or just a simple 2D website, it can now connect into that virtual world. So you can have a VoIP conversation without having to load up the full client kind of thing. So those type of experience, working with these companies and finding ways that we can not necessarily bring everything to the web, but kind of harness some of the power of the web to kind of boost their own platforms and boost the web as well. I think that's our kind of focus for this year.
Fantastic. I really appreciate your time in coming out today, and thank you to everyone who was able to attend. We will see a more and bigger and better in our new amphitheater coming soon. And yeah, I'm very excited. And to me, there is no sort of, I don't think this is the time for competition, and I feel a bit frustrated with Oculus for restrictive policies, because there's so few of us, and we need to support each other to build out this thing that we're trying to build. And then, it will segment on its own. People will go to the places they enjoy going. So again, thank you, James. Much appreciated.
Thank you
I'll
for
turn
having
it
me.
over to Snake. Yeah, thank you. And I'll turn it over to Snake now. And I do have to run, so thank you, everyone.
Great.
Thanks so much, Sasha. I appreciate your time coming in this evening. We've all got families, and I'm sure they get very busy. I haven't got mic right, so hopefully you guys can all hear me. Yeah, what sort of questions have we got here? Because one immediately jumps off my head is, how do you see 5G affecting us? Because we're hearing so much in the news lately about either illnesses it can cause or the number of masts that have got to go up. This could, I think, impact actually on the whole image of VR, because people want to use this really high-speed stuff for exactly what we're doing now, developing these fabulous worlds. But now are we going to have something actually dragging behind us like an anchor? What do you sort of feel about that?
Well, I mean, the whole 3G, 4G, 5G type of thing has always been a muddy situation, let's say. Already we have cases where AT&T is rolling out a product that they call 5G, which isn't really 5G. I try not to really concern myself too much with that side of things. People are going to call things what they call it. More generally speaking, that idea of higher bandwidth allows us to do more things. If that's in the form of mobile networks, and we have all these untethered headsets, VR and AR that can kind of take advantage of that, I think that's amazing. I think that's great, being able to deliver that type of interactive experience wherever you are. That being said, I've heard a lot of promises about 5G that don't match with what I know about reality. You know, we attended a telecom conference last year, maybe might have even been the end of the previous year, and you know, talking to all these kind of telecom industry executives. The idea, like the way they talk about it, it's like wherever you are in the world, you're going to have sub-millisecond latency, gigabit access to your phone. And that would be lovely. That would be amazing. That would be great. But I don't have a lot of faith in telecom's ability to roll that out universally. You know, I think if you're sitting in the middle of San Francisco, if you're sitting in New York, you know, Paris, a major city, yeah, you'll probably have good access there. But even today, with today's networks, I can drive north from San Francisco and in, you know, 15, 20 minutes, I'm already no more 4G, no more 3G, calls only, no calls. So like the majority of America, and this probably applies to the rest of the world as well. I know definitely in Asia, outside of the major cities, you go, you know, on vacation, you go to an island or something like that, you're on edge network, you know? So the idea that the telecom companies are going to be able to cover the entire world with 5G, when 5G being a higher network, a higher radio frequency, requires, as you say, more hotspots. You know, there's the marketing vision of it, and then there's reality. Reality is it's going to take many years for that to roll out to the level that it's going to be available to everyone. And we're excited. We're excited for more bandwidth. I'm never going to, you know, turn my nose up at the higher bandwidth, but you know, for me, it's a wait and see kind of thing. You know.
Definitely. Okay. Do we have any questions from the floor, guys? Absolute silence.
That just means we answered all the questions.
I think that we've done a brilliant job. So definitely no one from the floor. Okay, well then oh, go on.
Yeah. No, I'm blown away.
Blown away, yeah. Aren't we all? Absolutely awesome. You've done a fabulous job for us tonight, James. I do appreciate your time. Thanks very much, everyone, for coming in. We're pretty much on our 9 o'clock in the UK, so it'll be 10 out there in Berlin, I believe it is, on their time. So, again, appreciate your time. Thanks very much, everybody, and appreciate you, James, coming down to us.
Yep. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. A bit of bowling, go bowling, guys. How you doing now?
I'm going to go explore a little bit. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Cool.
Well, I've got time, James, so if you'd like, I can show you around Somnium and tell you all about us and give you some background on what's happening and what's developing.